Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman, and thanks for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, Chicago City Council members approve a new ward map for 2023, but not everyone is happy. We'll break down what's changed and what hasn't in a special Voices crossover conversation. Mayor Lori Lightfoot proposes an expanded curfew aimed at curbing violence. Chicago teens can get their game on at the first ever Gamers Convention, hosted by the Chicago Public Library. And arts correspondent Angel Edo introduces us to a local artist turning discarded materials into art honoring Black history. And first off tonight, Mayor Lori Lightfoot banged the gavel this week on a vote to approve a new ward map to take effect in 2023.
On the question of the redistricting map for the next decade, the yeas are 43. The nays are 7. The matter passes.
The map garnered enough city council votes to dodge a referendum, but some community organizations are saying the new map reflects the same old problems. No input from residents, neighborhoods carved up across ward boundaries, and borders drawn to punish political rivals. Joining us now as part of a special crossover with Chicago Tonight Latino Voices are Alma Cruiser, Executive Director and Vice President of the Hermosa Neighborhood Association, Aisha Butler, CEO and founder of the Resident Association of Greater Englewood, Chandra Van Dyke, Project Manager of the Chicago Advisory Redistricting Commission, launched by Change Illinois, and Juan Murado Jr., Chicago attorney and member of the Illinois Latino Agenda. Thanks to all of you for joining us. So let's just go around the room quickly. What is your reaction to the process of this map's approval? Alma, let's start with you, please.
Disappointed. I was very disappointed that they did this after I was hopeful that the coalition would, make it happen, get the residents' voices heard.
Aisha Butler.
I'm just disappointed with the process. I mean, I served on the Good Governance Committee for Lightfoot's transition, and this was one of the issues that we brought up about the transparency with the remapping. And to me, it just seems like it was kind of the same old, unfortunately.
Juan Murado Jr.
Yeah, I think it's just a huge lost opportunity. It's very disappointing how things ended up with the map that was eventually passed.
And Chandra Van Dyke.
Extremely disappointing to see, even with the opportunity to have residents at the table, politicians will choose Chicago business as usual.
Okay. So, Chandra, coming back to you, your organization, you engage with the aldermen on remapping, and some of those aldermen, they left the coalition to approve this map. What do you think was behind their decisions to leave the coalition?
Honestly, I have no clue. I think that's the golden question here. It obviously wasn't a matter of representation. The numbers are pretty much the same. And so it does leave one to wonder, at what cost did you decide to go against everything that you stood for in regards to transparency and community engagement in the mapping process? So it was extremely disappointing.
Does this give you the sense that maybe there was some backroom dealing that was made?
Oh, absolutely. That's Chicago business as usual. Going into a back room, coming up with whatever deals that works for their own self-preservation, because obviously this wasn't about communities. Splintering communities in the ways that this map does not empower residents or the projects that they have to push forward. And specifically, we see the same things happening in communities that significantly engaged with the commission. So it's extremely disappointing. And obviously, this had to be about self-interest and self-preservation.
Alma, how do you think the process should be engaging communities and residents on the remapping process?
I echo what Chandra said. It's the aldermen, city council should be listening to residents' concerns. In my case, I'm a resident of Hermosa, and For years, since my family moved in 1980, nothing has been done to make our community safer. So as Chandra said, it's all Chicago politics. Nothing will change.
Asia Butler, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, she declined to become involved in this process as it was playing out. Do you think she had any responsibility to intervene?
Absolutely. I think as a mayor of our city who also stood on transparency and really listening to the citizens of Chicago Voices, I definitely think she should have intervened in this conversation. And similarly to how they engage on Invest Southwest or any other projects that they want community input on, the map was actually more important to have that process done. So it was very disappointing that she didn't take that leadership role to make sure that kind of the same old did not happen. So very unfortunate.
Juan Morato Jr., a big part of this fight over the last few months was about getting more Latino majority wards on this map. That obviously did not happen in this case. How do Latinos who are seeking more representation in city council, how do they move forward from this?
Well, I mean, there's certainly this map is passed. Whether or not there's going to be any sort of litigation on this matter, I think remains to be seen. What I do think is most important moving forward is a robust voter education engagement and registration effort. You have 14 majority Latino seats now that are in this new map that was passed. Not all of those are represented by Latinos. And so if we are, as a community, going to exercise our political muscle, it's going to require engagement, it's going to require registration, and it's going to require getting people to the polls so that we can put the folks who look like us in those positions of power to represent us.
Alma, how about your community? How is this map going to affect your community?
To be honest, I won't see a difference. This is just same old, same old. So I'm very disappointed, very disappointed.
Asia Butler, same question to you, because obviously there's been this discussion for quite some time about how many different wards Inglewood is actually split up into. So how is this going to impact your community?
Yeah, when we first started, it was 6 wards, and then just recently it was about 5 1/4. We had the 3rd ward. Now it's exactly 5. The only good upside that we saw is that 2 of the wards significantly have a larger portion of Inglewood. So we're hoping with those 2 wards it'll be a little bit more advocacy, but still being split up into 5 wards is very difficult to move things forward in communities. And we've witnessed it, we've seen it, and we're going to have to still kind of muddle through this in the next few years.
Chandra Van Dyke, what's next? This is a done deal, it seems like, or is it? What do you think is next?
I think it's important that we don't allow it to be a done deal. That is Chicago business as usual. I think what's next is that we continue to educate residents and to engage them differently in this process, to get them registered to vote, to help them understand why it's important for them to have a voice in these processes, and not continue to allow our elected officials to hinder us from having those voices in our communities, but to really create a campaign around education in communities to keep them engaged and prepared for the next redistricting cycle so that we can keep pushing. There's also the work to be done at the state level to change the process of how this happens at a state level, because ultimately it's those policies and laws that allow for what we see to continue. So we have to do the work to see long-term reform at a statewide level. And that's what's really to look forward to, is engaging communities, educating communities, and long-term statewide reform.
Juan, what do you want aldermen and alder people to know about how this process played out, to have that knowledge for, I guess, 10 years from now, or just going forward?
I think it's important for any elected official to know that if this process is going to be seen as something that people of the various communities within Chicago are going to be able to support, it's going to have to involve some engagement, much more than what's going on right now. Whether that's through some sort of independent process or more direct engagement with residents between their aldermen, regardless of which organizations they come from or which parts of their wards they live in, right? This has to get everybody involved and everybody all in. And so I think my message to them would be the engagement needs to start earlier, and it needs to be often. And what it really needs to do is make sure it's taking into account the needs of those in our community who might not necessarily be able to speak out for themselves, so that they can get equal services and that the representation at the city council level can be, in fact, be equitable.
Aisha, do you see anything changing in the near future or even just before the next map process?
I can't say that I do right now. I definitely think that more folks were involved. When we first started doing this work, a lot of folks was not interested. This time around, people were involved because it was an avenue for people voices to be heard through the coalition. But, you know, I'm hoping and I'm optimistic that the two wards that have the majority of Inglewood will be stronger advocates than what we have right now. And so I'm hoping will happen immediately.
Okay, that's where we'll have to leave it. My thanks to our guests for joining us, Aisha Butler, Chandra Van Dyke, Juan Murado Jr., and Alma Cruiser for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for more on the controversial new city ward map, be sure to check out Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. We're back with more Chicago Tonight Black Voices right after this. Mayor Lori Lightfoot is asking alderpeople to change an ordinance to expand the curfew for teens to start at 10 p.m. on Friday and Saturday nights. Now, this is in addition to a new rule requiring minors visiting Millennium Park to be accompanied by a, quote, responsible adult after 6 p.m. Thursday through Sunday. That rule was announced after the fatal shooting of 16-year-old Shondell Holliday in the heart of the tourist favorite park. Joining us to talk about how these new rules could affect Chicago teens as we head into the summer are Pastor Corey Brooks, founder of the nonprofit Project Hood, and Essence Jade Gatherright, a youth organizing fellow with the Chicago Freedom School, Gatherright, excuse me. So I'm going to ask the same question to both of you. Pastor Brooks, starting with you, please. Do you think this expanded curfew will be effective in curbing violence? I think you're muted, Pastor. It's okay. Happens to all of us.
Sorry.
It's all right.
I don't think it'll be effective in curbing violence. You know, you still have all these hours that young people are still able to participate and do all the things that they normally do. It's very unfortunate that we've gotten to the point to where we need certain liberties to be taken away because of the violence. I do understand that we have to do something for these young people, give them opportunities and alternatives. That's the reason why I believe having centers like the one that we're trying to build is so important, because they do need outlets, they do need places to go. But it's very disheartening that in the city of Chicago, our young people don't have places to express themselves in positive ways.
Essence Jade, same question to you. Do you think an expanded curfew will be effective at curbing violence?
No, I don't think it'll be effective at all, primarily because it neglects the root causes of violence. When you look at, unemployment or underfunded schools and how well-funded like the police is, it neglects the root causes. It doesn't address what it is that the youth need. When you look at, schools, when you look at mental health centers, when you look at jobs, when you look at community centers, none of that is being funded in these Black and brown communities. And so by telling them to go home early, sending them back to the hood, sending them back to these underfunded communities, that does nothing to curb any of the violence.
Pastor Brooks, should this curfew go into effect? It went before the City Council's Public Safety Committee on Friday and passed. But should the City Council agree to it as well, the entire council, do you trust that the police will enforce it equitably?
I would only hope and pray that they would. You never can tell. Whenever the government is involved in taking away people's liberties, it's always a slippery slope. So I am concerned that things will be looked at differently. I am very concerned that it's going to lead to more children, more young people being arrested, therefore putting things on their record, therefore eventually not allowing them to get the jobs that they're going to need, schools that they're going to need to go to. So it's a very touchy subject. And it's, I think there are other things that we can do to curb the violence other than just putting a curfew in place. Although I do understand the need because things are so bad. But I do agree with Essence that we have to find another way to support the efforts that we're trying to do with our young people other than a curfew.
Essence Jade, you obviously you work with young people at the Chicago Freedom School. Are many even aware of the curfew? Is it something that they were observing in the first place?
So honestly, no. I can say even myself, being a young person, I was never, it wasn't a thing that we were observant of or mindful of at all. We enjoyed ourselves. We enjoyed our freedom. We enjoyed town, just, all the communities within the city of Chicago. I learned how to skateboard last summer. It was like 10 of me and my young friends skateboarding at Grant Park consistently late at night, almost until like 1 a.m. And so those are liberties that we enjoy. Those are things that we enjoy. It builds community, and we felt safe down there. So to have those spaces.
Mm-hmm. So, Pastor Brooks, I think we've talked about this a bit, but what in your experience, you said that you all are working on building a center, for example, but what in your experience does work when it comes to stopping violence and limiting it?
Well, one, we have to start a lot earlier than what we're starting. We have to start with young people as early as possible, giving them the mentors that they desperately needed. Secondly, we have to have places that they can go. In the city of Chicago, you don't have places that young people feel like they can go and have safe spaces to be creative, to be young, and to have fun with their friends, to build community. And so it's very important that we create these spaces. And I think when we do, that'll be one of the ways that we can help to curb the violence, especially if these centers have wraparound services that are so desperately needed.
Essence Jade, the mayor's Millennium Park restrictions, it also calls for one responsible adult, that's a direct quote, to be with minors in the park after 6 p.m. from Thursday to Sunday. What's your reaction to that requirement, that one responsible adult be there as well?
I also think that it is extremely vague. And so for me, I think that lack of clarity also is, in a sense, it also feels intentional, because when you look at youth who are now trying to maneuver these new policies and these new rules, if I'm 16 hanging out with my 18-year-old friend, are they legally an adult? Does that make them, who's to say that they're responsible? How are you gauging the responsibility? Are you are we checking report cards? How are we gauging this at all? I think it's also my question, what does a responsible adult look like? What is it like? How will those, again, interactions, when you talk about police enforcing these, how is that going to work? Because again, you have youth, who may be 16 and 18, 16 to 18 is like a normal friend group for you. And so if we're interacting at the park, how is that, does that fit the standard, or will we be arrested, or will we be, kicked out? Or so I'm curious about even what that means. I feel like there's a lack of clarity around that whole line there, honestly.
Pastor Brooks, same question to you. What's your reaction to that requirement? And are parents themselves, because we asked Essence Jade, about whether or not young people are aware of the existence of the curfew. Do parents know about the curfew no matter what time it starts?
Well, number one, parents do need to take more of a responsibility for their children. There's no way that we should be experiencing all the things that we're experiencing in downtown Chicago as far as the violence is concerned, and children who are being out of order. Parents should definitely take more of a role in having responsibility for their children. The second thing I want to say is that, at what age do they declare that a person is with an adult? Is that a 16-year-old who's with a 19-year-old? Is that a 16-year-old who's with a 21-year-old? At what age is an adult? And at what age do they feel that it is appropriate for someone to be downtown? So I think with this policy, they definitely got to have to make it a lot more clear, because if not, there are going to be a lot of young people possibly being arrested. And I think that it causes a whole nother issue.
We know that, summer hasn't quite started yet, but it is unfortunately a time where we see an increase in violence. Essence Jade, we don't have a whole lot of time left, about 30 seconds, but what short-term changes could be made between, in the next few months to limit violence?
Again, I definitely think investing in these fundamental pillars of support, when we look at community centers, when we look at mental health resources, when we look at just developing more sustainable and supportive communities and funding them. So when we look at how the COVID relief money, how over 60% of it was given to the police, how does that support the community? How does that support the youth? And again, when we look at how policing has negatively impacted Black and Brown communities, that in turn has perpetuated this cycle of violence, these cycles of harm that are being upheld.
No easy fixes, of course. That's where we'll have to leave it. My thanks to Pastor Corey Brooks and Essence Jade Gather Right for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chicago teens looking for something fun, safe, and a little geeky to do, particularly over Memorial Day weekend, though, they can head downtown to the Harold Washington Library for Gamers Universe. It's a free-of-charge gaming convention designed by the Chicago Teen Gamers Guild. Teen Services Library Associate Justin Shannon says there's something at the convention for every level of gamer.
We are hosting the first ever convention of Gamers Universe, which is a teen-created convention for all ages, and it is dedicated to gaming of all forms. So there's going to be video games there, board gaming there, a scavenger hunt. Someone from an escape room company in Chicago is coming in to talk about how they do immersive design in stories. And a professional costume designer is going to be coming in to lead a workshop on how to create your own cosplay so you can then go into a cosplay contest after. So gaming of all types for all ages. We also have a website that the teens created, which also has links to the sign up on there. It also has a schedule of all of the various events that are going to be happening at the convention.
So you can get your game on. The one-day convention takes place on Saturday, May 28th. You'll find more on that on our website. Up next, a local artist reimagining discarded materials. Stay with us. What it was, what it is, and what it shall be. That's how artist Nick Cave describes his three-part exhibition on display at the Museum of Contemporary Art, Chicago, as he works to reclaim identity with help from discarded objects. Arts correspondent Angel Ito takes us to Four Other More.
It's a full circle moment, literally, for Nick Cave as he takes a look back at his career in full in a new exhibit at the MCA titled Four Other More.
You'll see tondos, a series of sound suits, old as well as most current ones that are really sort of based on George Floyd. And then you'll see a number of other sculptural sort of works throughout the show.
It's in repurposed objects of all types that Cave works to acknowledge and celebrate the new life he's found and the objects that were once discarded. This comes after decades of traveling as an emerging artist, creating art with nothing more than what surrounded him.
Materials also provides a way in for a lot of the audience, that there's something that you are going to be able to relate to that's familiar.
But reclaiming discarded objects is not the only narrative Cave works to address.
For decades have been trying to bring light to the subject of racism, inequality, and justice. And at the same time, I have to sort of resolve that within myself. Every time something happens, I've got to resolve it. Otherwise, it could destroy me. I'm sort of interested in, shifting the narrative and sort of owning our history, owning our past, and being resilient in that sort of process. And how do you sort of like psychologically work through manipulative sort of ways of calculating how we sort of exist and saying no to that? And so it's my way of sort of recognizing and putting it in your face, but at the same time, elevating it and empowering it.
No matter the medium, Cave says he hopes his work serves as a vehicle for change as he continues what he describes as his civic responsibility to speak for the voices that are not heard.
I want to sort of take you on this journey. I want there to be moments of silence. I want there to be moments of stillness. And I want you to find ways in which you feel that you can come to the work and be open to something that is unfamiliar, that looks different. And how do we sort of step up to that?
For Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Angel Ito.
For Other More is on display at the MCA until October 2nd. And that's our show for this weekend. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. And if you're watching us on Saturday night, know that you can also catch Black Voices and Latino Voices on Sundays beginning at 10 p.m. And join me and Paris Schutz next week at 7 on Chicago Tonight. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a proud sponsor of diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused free continuing legal education for lawyers throughout the region.